Hello, my name is Craig Hamby. I'm the Director of Elementary Education here at Lindbergh Schools, and I'd like to take a few moments to talk to you about standards-based learning. Standards-based learning is our way of accurately measuring where a child is in their learning. It is important for us to know and provide lessons that are on the child's level to make sure we are doing responsive teaching, responsive to the needs of the student, and developing personalized learning when possible. Teachers are going to be collecting evidence throughout the year. So it's not just quizzes and tests. They're going to be observing your students. They're going to be having conversations with your students, watching them work with others. And all of this gives us a better idea of where a student is in their learning. Once we have that, we can clearly communicate to those students, here's where you are in your learning, here's what you're doing well at, and here is what's next. And it also allows the teachers to communicate these same things to the parents. At each grade level, we have determined the essential skills that we believe are paramount or necessary for success in each grade level. And we refer to these as our priority standards. So here you see an example of the first grade math priority standards. So we feel that a first grader at the end of the school year, we want them to be very successful and efficient in these standards. So then we take each of those standards and we unpack it and we develop a proficiency scale, which you see an example of here. This helps us define what is mastery. This is an example of a third grade standard, rounding whole numbers to the nearest 10 or 100. So if you'll look in the middle of the screen where it says ME or that 3.0, that is our target. That is what we have defined as mastery. So if a student can do those things consistently, we will consider them having mastered this standard. Now you notice there are check boxes because the teacher can go through and actually check. Yes, you can round 1 to 3-digit whole numbers to the nearest 10. We have not made it to rounding 2 to 4 digits, so we still have some work to do. But this allows us to measure the learning very accurately of a student. And it also allows us to have a consistent definition of mastery for all of those priority standards for all of our teachers across all 6 elementary schools. So it'll look a little different when we report out to families and to students. So instead of giving a grade in math, what you're going to see is throughout the year we're going to send home 2 progress reports, one at the end of the first trimester, which will be in early November, and one at the end of the second trimester, which will be in mid-February. And then at the end of the year we get our final report card. So it's 2 progress reports because we're measuring progress on end-of-year outcomes. So we are looking at our learning over the entire school year and most of these standards. So 2 progress reports and 1 report card. And each subject, instead of getting a grade in math, we are going to measure the learning or the progress of the students and the individual priority standards under our core subjects of math, reading, writing, social studies, and science. So how are we going to communicate this? Well, we're going to communicate in proficiency level. So we're not using A, B, C, or D because we're not averaging grades. We're not collecting points. We don't want students trying to get a certain amount of points. We want them to concentrate on their learning. So our system, our proficiency levels, we are going to use. I'm going to start with the ME, which is the mastery of the essential standard. That is our target. That's where we want students to be at the end of the year. Now I say end of the year because a normal progression of learning is going to be a student will be still developing, then they'll move to nearing mastery, and then they will get to mastery. So at the end of the first trimester, if a student's not mastery, that is okay because we may not have taught to the mastery level yet. So we're looking at end of year outcomes and letting students take a realistic path to mastery of those standards. But that's our target, mastery. That means they've checked off all the boxes on that proficiency scale. If they can do that and they're showing us evidence of working beyond that, if a teacher collects and consistently a student is transferring that knowledge to a different context or working at a level which we would consider above the grade level, that is something we would mark as an EE. It's exceeded our expectations. If a student's not quite to mastery, they're on the way, not quite there, that of course is nearing mastery. Hopefully that makes sense. And when we're just beginning, this is not negative. Everyone has to start somewhere. But when we're just beginning, we are starting to develop, are still developing those beginning skills that we're going to need for mastery. A lot of the prerequisite skills, understanding the vocabulary of the concept, things of that nature. We have a couple others. We have an AC. So if we have a student who is needing more support than we were expecting, we might mark them as an AC because we're a little concerned they're not grasping this without our support as much as we would like. Or we are having to use a different curriculum with them. So maybe you're in third grade and we're still working on some second grade level stuff. That's when we might mark an AC because we're using alternative content or alternative curriculum. But it's still going to provide you with the information as a parent that you would need to know where your student is. And what's nice is that our elementary teachers have access to all the K through 5 proficiency scales. So even if they're not working on grade level, they'll be able to clearly show you those learning targets on the proficiency scale of here's what we are working on. So everyone's growing. They just might be growing at different rates. A saying I've heard is not all popcorn pops at the same time, but we're going to measure where we are at in our popping, so to speak. And then we have two more. We have modified programming. If a student is perhaps they are receiving special education services and we might be using a different program with them, we would mark modified programming, and then those teachers would communicate to the student, the parent, once again, exactly where they are in their learning. Or if we're using a completely different program, such as a different reading program with the student than what we're using with everyone else in the class, we might mark modified programming. If a teacher has not gotten to a certain standard by the time the progress reports or report cards are due, you might see an NA, which means not assessed at this time. It's like we haven't gotten there yet, so we can't hold our students responsible for something we haven't taught yet. The analogy I like to use is riding a bike. So we want our students at the end of the year to be able to ride a bike. So if you look there at the ME, that young man there is smiling and riding the bike. He has mastered his essential skills. But he didn't start there. He started back. We've got the young child there at SD. That's the beginning, starting to develop those skills. We're on the tricycle. We get comfortable on the tricycle. Not quite to the bike yet. We still got the training wheels on. That's our nearing of mastery. So that's our NM. So we've got the training wheels still. We lose the training skills. We can do everything we expect you to do by the end of the grade level, and that's when you are riding your bike, and that is our ME, Mastery of Essential Skills. Now, this is not expected, but some students will take off and they're riding wheelies, maybe they're riding on the ramps, and we will be watching for that, and those are the students we'll mark as exceeding expectations. But just to be clear, a normal progression of learning throughout the school year will be still developing, nearing mastery, and our final target is mastery of essential skills. Just to give you an example of how these progress reports and report cards are going to look different, a traditional report card might have, you see, in math class, you have a 71%, that's a C. As a parent, I ask, well, what does that mean? What do you need to work on? What have you done well at? It doesn't give me a lot of information. We're on a standards-based report card or progress report. We're going to break that math class down into the individual standards, and we'll see, and then we're going to give a measurement on where you are in the learning there. So if I look down at the standards-based report card, rounding numbers, meeting essential skills, that's good. Addition, exceeding, subtraction, mastery of the essential skills, that's good. Multiplication, nearing mastery, I'm almost there, need a little work. Fractions, I'm just starting to learn about fractions. So it gives me a much better idea as a parent, as a teacher, so I can plan lessons, as a student on what I need to work on. Finally, one last analogy for you is that if I take my car to the mechanic and the mechanic says, your car's in pretty good shape, I'd give it a B+. All right, what does that really tell me? A standards-based garage would give me the following report. Your engine's great, the battery's in great shape, transmission's great. Brakes, not looking so good. We might need to do some brake work. And your tires, they're okay, but we're probably going to have to change those eventually. Gives me a much better idea of where my car is as I'm driving down the road. So hopefully this has helped give you a little insight on what standards-based learning is and our system with our progress reports and our report card. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at chamby@Lindbergh Schools, and I would be happy to have a conversation with you about standards-based learning. Thank you.